The wind carried the scent of pine and damp earth as Clara Hammond stepped off the stagecoach, her boots sinking into the soft mud of Willow Creek's main street. The sun hung low, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, but its warmth did little to ease the knot in her chest. She clutched her single leather satchel, its worn edges a testament to the miles she'd traveled from Boston to this speck of a town in the Montana Territory, 1876. At 32, Clara was no stranger to starting over, but the weight of this journey felt heavier than any before. She'd come here chasing a promise, a letter from a man named Henry Whitaker, who'd offered marriage through a mail-order bride arrangement. A new life, a fresh start. But as she scanned the dusty street, no one stepped forward to greet her. The townsfolk bustled around her, their curious glances sharp as thorns. Clara adjusted her bonnet, aware of how her plain gray dress and freckled face drew whispers. She wasn't the delicate beauty men expected from a bride-to-be. Her broad shoulders and calloused hands spoke of years working her father's failing farm, not of dainty parlors or polished manners. Still, she'd hoped Henry would see past that. The letter in her pocket, creased from countless readings, had promised as much. "I seek a partner, not a prize," he'd written. Those words had sparked something in her, a fragile hope she hadn't dared to nurture since her fiancé in Boston had left her for a wealthier match, calling her too plain, too stubborn for his world. A man approached, his boots clicking on the wooden boardwalk. He was tall, with a neatly trimmed beard and a fine suit that screamed city money. "Miss Hammond." His voice was clipped, impatient. Clara nodded, her heart lifting. "I'm Henry Whitaker." But his eyes, cold as the river she'd crossed to get here, raked over her, lingering on her worn dress and sturdy frame. "I expected someone different," he said, his tone flat. "I'm sorry, but this won't do. I need a wife who can hold her own in society, not a farmhand." The words hit like a slap. Clara's breath caught, but she squared her shoulders, refusing to let him see her flinch. "You wrote of partnership, Mr. Whitaker. Did you mean it only for someone who fits your picture of a lady?" Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled inside her gloves. Henry's jaw tightened. "This is a mistake. I'll pay for your return fare." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the fading light. Clara's knees threatened to buckle, but she forced herself to move. She wouldn't beg. She'd come to Willow Creek for a new life, not just a husband. The town stretched before her, a cluster of clapboard buildings, framed by towering pines and the distant snow-capped peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains. Somewhere in this place, she'd find her purpose. As she trudged toward the boarding house, a man's voice called out, "Need help with that bag, ma'am." She turned to see a broad-shouldered man in a worn flannel shirt, his hazel eyes kind but guarded. He tipped his hat, revealing a mop of dark hair streaked with early gray. "I'm Elias Kane," he said. "Run the orchard just outside town. Saw you with Whitaker." "Rough start, I reckon." Clara managed a small smile. "I've had worse." But the sting of Henry's rejection lingered sharp as the autumn chill creeping through her shawl. Elias didn't pry, just offered to carry her satchel. As they walked, the scent of apples and wood smoke clung to him, grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. Maybe Willow Creek wasn't done with her yet. The boarding house smelled of stale coffee and lavender soap, a strange mix that clung to the faded wallpaper as Clara settled into her narrow room. Moonlight spilled through the single window, casting shadows on the quilted bedspread. She sat on the edge of the mattress, her satchel at her feet, and unfolded Henry Whitaker's letter one last time. His words, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a taunt. "I seek a partner, not a prize." She crumpled the paper and tossed it into the corner. Partnership, it seemed, came with conditions she hadn't anticipated, like fitting into a mold she'd never been shaped for. But Clara hadn't crossed half a continent to crumble. She'd build something here, with or without a husband. Morning broke with the crow of a rooster and the clatter of pans downstairs. Clara dressed in her sturdiest skirt, ignoring the ache in her chest, and headed to the common room. Mrs. Tilley, the boarding house matron, greeted her with a warm smile and a plate of biscuits. "Heard about Whitaker," she said, her gray eyes sharp but kind. "Man's a fool. You're better off without him." Clara nodded, grateful for the older woman's bluntness. Tilly, with her flour-dusted apron and quick wit, felt like the first ally in this unfamiliar place. Determined to find work, Clara ventured into Willow Creek's bustling heart. The town was small but alive, its streets humming with merchants hawking wares, and children darting between horse-drawn carts. The air carried the tang of freshly cut timber and the distant rush of the Bitterroot River. Clara's boots crunched on gravel as she approached the general store hoping for a job. The owner, Mr. Grayson, peered over his spectacles, his gaze lingering on her plain face and strong hands. "We need delicate hands for clerking, miss," he said not unkindly. "Maybe try the livery stable." The rejection stung, echoing Henry's dismissal, but Clara pressed on. She tried the seamstress, the bakery, even the telegraph office. Each door closed with polite excuses, their eyes betraying the same judgment: she wasn't what they expected. By noon, her hope had worn thin, and she found herself at the edge of town, where the road gave way to rolling orchards. The scent of ripe apples filled the air, and she paused, letting the sweetness calm her racing thoughts. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," a familiar voice called. Elias Kane emerged from the trees, a basket of apples slung over his shoulder. His flannel shirt was rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms tanned by years under the sun. "Still settling in?" he asked, setting the basket down. "Trying to," Clara admitted, her voice softer than she intended. "Seems Willow Creek isn't sure it wants me." Elias chuckled, a low, warm sound. "This town's slow to trust newcomers. Took me a year to stop being that orchard fella. You'll find your place." He offered her an apple, its red skin gleaming. "Grew these myself. Best in the territory." She took it, their fingers brushing briefly. The fruit was warm from the sun, and its crisp bite brought a fleeting smile to her face. "You've got a gift for this," she said. "Had to learn it the hard way," Elias replied, his eyes distant. "Lost my wife 5 years back. Fever took her. The orchard's what kept me going." His honesty caught her off guard, raw and unguarded, unlike the polished platitudes she'd heard from men like Henry. Before she could respond, a woman's voice cut through the air. Elias Kane, always charming the newcomers. A striking woman with auburn hair and a tailored dress approached her, smile sharp as a blade. "I'm Lillian Carver," she said, eyeing Clara with cool appraisal. "Elias and I go way back." The way she lingered on Elias's arm suggested more than friendship, and Clara felt a pang she couldn't name. "Clara Hammond," she replied, meeting Lillian's gaze. Something in the woman's eyes felt like a challenge, but Clara wasn't here to fight over a man she'd just met. She had bigger battles to win, like finding a way to belong in Willow Creek. As Lillian sauntered off, Elias turned back to Clara. "Don't mind her. She's complicated. Say you ever worked an orchard, I could use a hand, and you look like you're no stranger to hard work." Clara's heart lifted, cautious but hopeful. Was this her chance to take root in the stubborn soil? The orchard stretched before Clara, like a sea of green, its apple trees heavy with fruit under the late morning sun. The air buzzed with the hum of bees and the rustle of leaves, a symphony that drowned out the sting of Willow Creek's rejections. She stood beside Elias, her sleeves rolled up, her hands already dusted with earth from helping him prune a row of trees. The work was familiar. Her father's farm had taught her how to coax life from stubborn soil. But the warmth of Elias's quiet encouragement felt new. "You've got a knack for this," he said, watching her deftly trim a wayward branch. His hazel eyes crinkled at the corners, and for a moment Clara forgot the weight of Henry Whitaker's dismissal. But the town's judgment lingered like a shadow. As she and Elias worked, a group of townsfolk passed by on the road, their whispers carrying on the breeze. "That's the woman Whitaker sent packing," one said, loud enough to sting. "Too plain for a man like him." Clara's jaw tightened, her knife pausing mid-cut. She'd heard worse in Boston. Her former fiancé's cruel words still echoed in her mind, but the fresh wound of Henry's rejection made each barb cut deeper. Elias noticed her stillness. "Don't let them get to you," he said, his voice low but firm. "Folks here love to talk, but they'll come around when they see what you're made of." He handed her another pruning knife, his calloused fingers steady. "Focus on the trees. They don't judge." Clara nodded, grateful for his quiet strength. As they worked, she learned more about him. Elias had come to Willow Creek a decade ago, fleeing a past he only hinted at: a broken engagement in Virginia, a family that turned their backs when he chose a farmer's life over their expectations. "Orchards don't care about your name or your looks," he said, tossing a rotten apple into a bucket. "They just need you to show up." His words resonated with Clara, who'd spent her life proving her worth through work, not beauty. By afternoon, her muscles ached, but the rhythm of the orchard soothed her. She was wiping sweat from her brow when Tilly, the boarding house matron, appeared with a basket of bread and cheese. "Thought you two could use a break," she said, her eyes twinkling, as she glanced between Clara and Elias. "You're a natural out here, Clara. Better than most men I know." Her praise warmed Clara, but it also drew a sharp glance from Lillian Carver, who'd appeared at the orchard's edge, her auburn hair gleaming under a parasol. "Elias, you're wasting your time with hired help." Lillian called, her voice syrupy, but edged with disdain. "The harvest festival's coming up. You'll need a proper partner for the dance, not someone covered in dirt." Her eyes flicked to Clara, dismissing her with a smirk. Clara's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. "I'm here to work, Miss Carver, not to dance." Her tone was even, but inside she bristled. Lillian's beauty and confidence reminded her of the women in Boston who'd mocked her plainness, yet something about the woman's fixation on Elias stirred a flicker of defiance in Clara. She wasn't competing for his attention. She barely knew him, but she wouldn't let Lillian's barbs define her. Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Clara's doing fine work, Lillian. Better than most who've tried. You should come by the festival yourself, see what this orchard's worth." His defense was subtle, but it sent Lillian's smile faltering. She huffed and turned away, her parasol snapping shut. Tilly chuckled as Lillian retreated. "That one's got her sights set on Elias since his wife passed. Don't mind her, Clara. She's all bark." But Clara wasn't so sure. Lillian's presence felt like a storm brewing, one that could threaten the fragile roots she was planting here. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light through the trees, Elias handed Clara a ripe apple. "You did good today," he said. "Stick around and we'll make this orchard something special." His words held a quiet promise, and for the first time since arriving in Willow Creek, Clara felt a spark of belonging. But could she truly carve out a place here, with Lillian's shadow looming and the town's whispers growing louder? The Harvest Festival's lanterns glowed like fireflies against the deepening twilight, their light dancing across Willow Creek's town square. Clara stood at the edge of the crowd, her breath catching at the sight of tables laden with pies, cider, and woven baskets of apples from Elias's orchard. The air was thick with the scent of cinnamon and wood smoke, and fiddles sang a lively tune that set couples spinning on the makeshift dance floor. Clara smoothed her borrowed dress, a simple blue frock from Tilly's closet that hugged her frame more than she liked. She felt exposed not because of the dress, but because of the eyes that followed her. The townsfolk's whispers had grown bolder since her arrival, and tonight they buzzed like the insects in Elias's orchard. Whitaker's cast off, they called her as if her worth began and ended with a man's rejection. She'd come to the festival at Tilly's insistence, who declared, "You're part of this town now, like it or not. Show 'em you belong." Clara wasn't so sure. She'd spent the past week working alongside Elias, her hands growing accustomed to the rhythm of pruning and picking, her heart warming to his quiet kindness. But the town's judgment clung to her like damp wool, heavy and suffocating. She scanned the crowd for Elias, hoping his presence might anchor her, but he was nowhere in sight. Instead, Henry Whitaker appeared, his polished boots gleaming, as he approached with a group of well-dressed townsfolk. His eyes locked on Clara, and a smirk curled his lips. "Miss Hammond," he said, loud enough for nearby heads to turn. "I see you found work as a laborer. Pity you couldn't manage a better fit." His companions chuckled, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Clara's stomach twisted, but she refused to shrink. "I'd rather earn my keep than beg for a place I don't want," she said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. Henry's smirk faltered, but before he could retort, Elias emerged from the crowd, his flannel shirt swapped for a clean vest that did little to hide his farmer's build. "Clara's work is worth more than your words, Whitaker," he said, his tone calm but edged with steel. The crowd hushed, sensing a shift. Henry straightened his jaw tight, but he said nothing, retreating with a curt nod as his companions followed. Elias turned to Clara, his hazel eyes softening. "You all right?" he asked, offering her a tin cup of cider. She took it, her fingers brushing his, and the warmth of the drink steadied her. "I'm fine," she said, though her heart still raced. "Just tired of being the town's gossip." "They'll tire of it too," Elias said, guiding her toward a quieter corner near a stack of hay bales. You're doing good work at the orchard. That's what matters. His sincerity disarmed her, and for a moment she let herself relax, savoring the cider's sweet tang and the distant hum of the fiddles. But the peace didn't last. Lillian Carver glided into view, her emerald dress catching every eye as she approached Elias with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Elias, you promised me a dance," she said, her voice honeyed but possessive. She barely glanced at Clara as if she were no more than a shadow. Elias hesitated, his gaze flickering to Clara, but he nodded. "One dance, Lillian," he said, and followed her to the dance floor. Clara watched them move, Lillian's grace a stark contrast to her own sturdy frame. The old wound from Boston reopened her fiancé's voice, echoing too plain, too stubborn. She turned away, her chest tight, and found Tilly nearby, her arms crossed. "Don't let Lillian fool you," Tilly said. "Elias isn't hers, no matter how she acts. But you've got to decide what you're fighting for here, Clara. His heart or your own place in this world." Tilly's words struck deep. Clara hadn't come to Willow Creek for love, but Elias's kindness, his respect, had stirred something she hadn't felt in years. As the fiddles played on and the lanterns swayed, she realized she wanted both to build a life here and to know if Elias could be part of it. But with Lillian circling and the town watching, could she find the courage to claim either? The river ran silver under the dawn's first light, its gentle rush a quiet companion as Clara walked along its banks. Willow Creek's festival lingered in her mind, the swirl of lanterns, the sting of Henry's words, and the sight of Elias dancing with Lillian. She'd left early, unable to watch Lillian's hand on his arm, her laughter ringing like a bell. Clara kicked a pebble into the water, its ripples spreading wide. She hadn't come here to chase a man, yet Elias's steady presence had rooted itself in her thoughts, as persistent as the willows lining the river. But the town's whispers and Lillian's sharp glances reminded her of the truth: belonging in Willow Creek would take more than a kind farmer's smile. Back at the orchard, the air was thick with the scent of apples and dew-soaked grass. Elias was already at work, his shirt sleeves rolled up as he loaded crates onto a wagon. "You're up early," he called, his voice warm but tinged with concern. "Everything all right after last night?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening around the pruning shears she'd borrowed. "Just needed to clear my head," she said, joining him. "The festival, it reminded me how much this town loves to judge." Elias set down a crate, his gaze steady. "They judged me too when I first came. Called me a fool for planting apples in rocky soil. But look at this place now." He gestured to the orchard, its trees heavy with fruit. "You keep showing up, Clara. That's what changes minds." His words sparked something in her, a flicker of resolve. She threw herself into the day's work, her hands moving with purpose as they sorted apples and repaired a broken fence. Elias worked beside her, their rhythm easy, punctuated by small moments of laughter, when a wormy apple startled her or he teased her about her fierce concentration. For the first time, Clara felt like she was building something, not just surviving. But the peace shattered at midday when Henry Whitaker rode up on a sleek black horse, his fine coat pristine, despite the dusty trail. "Kane," he called, ignoring Clara. "I'm buying land for a new lumber mill. Your orchard's in my sights. Sell now, or you'll regret it." His tone was cold, his eyes flicking to Clara, as if she were proof of Elias's poor judgment. Elias crossed his arms, unmoved. "This land's not for sale, Whitaker. It's my home, my work." "You know that." Henry's lip curled. "You're wasting prime land on fruit when lumber's the future, and keeping company with rejects won't help your standing." He nodded toward Clara, his words slicing through the air. Clara's blood boiled, but before she could speak, Elias stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to talk about Clara like that, or my orchard. Get off my land." Henry's horse shifted nervously as he glared, but he turned and rode off without another word. Clara's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the fire in Elias's defense. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice softer than she meant. "I did," Elias replied, his eyes meeting hers. "You're worth more than his nonsense, and this orchard's worth fighting for." His words hung between them, heavy with meaning, and for a moment the world narrowed to the warmth in his gaze and the scent of apples on the breeze. But trouble wasn't done with them. As they returned to work, Tilly arrived, her face grim. "Heard from the blacksmith Whitaker stirring up the town council. Says your orchard's a drain on Willow Creek's progress. He's pushing to force a sale. She glanced at Clara. And he's spreading word that you're trouble, Clara. Says you're proof Elias makes bad choices. Clara's stomach sank. She'd come here to escape judgment, not to bring it down on Elias. I should go, she said, her voice tight. I'm causing you trouble. No, Elias said firmly, his hand grazing her arm. You're not running. We'll face this together. His touch was brief but steady, and in it Clara felt a spark of something deeper: partnership, not pity. Could she stay and fight not just for herself, but for the life she was beginning to imagine here? The sky over Willow Creek hung heavy with clouds, their gray edges promising rain, as Clara stood in the orchard, her hands stained with apple juice and her heart racing with resolve. The past week had been a blur of work, picking fruit, mending fences, and ignoring the whispers that followed her through town. Henry Whitaker's threat to take Elias's land had lit a fire in her, one that burned brighter than the fear of being unwanted. She glanced at Elias, who was stacking crates nearby, his brow furrowed with worry he tried to hide. The orchard was more than his livelihood. It was his sanctuary, just as it was becoming hers. She wouldn't let Henry tear it down without a fight. The town council meeting was set for that evening, and Clara knew it would be a battleground. Henry had spent days rallying support, painting Elias as a stubborn dreamer, and Clara as an outsider dragging him down. She'd overheard the gossip at the general store. She's no lady, that Clara. Too rough for Willow Creek. Each word stung, but she channeled the pain into purpose. If the town wanted to judge her, she'd give them something worth talking about. Tilly arrived at noon, her arms full of flyers she'd scribbled by hand. We're not letting Whitaker win this, she declared, handing Clara a stack. These invite folks to the meeting to support Elias. You're going to speak, Clara. Show 'em what you're made of. Clara's stomach twisted at the thought of facing the town, but Tilly's fierce grin left no room for doubt. You've got a voice. Use it. As the day wore on, Clara and Elias worked side by side, their usual ease tempered by the looming meeting. He told her stories of the orchard's early days, how he'd planted every tree himself, how his late wife had loved the spring blossoms. His voice softened when he spoke of her, and Clara felt a pang of envy, not for his past love, but for the tenderness he carried. You ever think about starting over? She asked, her voice barely above the rustle of leaves. Elias paused, his eyes meeting hers. Every day. But it's not about forgetting the past. It's about building something new, like you're doing. His words wrapped around her like a warm shawl, and for a moment the orchard felt like a world where they could both belong. The council meeting was held in the town hall, a squat building lit by flickering oil lamps. Clara stood at the back, her hands clasped to hide their trembling, as Henry Whitaker took the floor. His voice was smooth, his suit impeccable, as he argued that Elias's orchard was holding back progress. Lumber is Willow Creek's future, he said, gesturing grandly. Kane's land could bring jobs, wealth. Instead, he clings to apples and poor company. His eyes flicked to Clara, and the crowd murmured, their gazes heavy on her. Elias stood next, his voice steady but unpolished. This orchard feeds families, not just mine. It's part of this town's heart. You take it, you're taking more than land. His words were simple, but they carried weight, and Clara saw a few heads nod in agreement. Then Tilly nudged her forward. Your turn, she whispered. Clara's heart pounded as she stepped into the lamplight, feeling every eye on her plain dress and weathered hands. I came to Willow Creek for a new start. She began, her voice shaky but growing stronger. I know I'm not what some of you expect, but I've worked this orchard, seen its worth. It's not just land, it's a promise of something lasting. If you let Mr. Whitaker take it, you're letting him decide what this town values. I say we value hard work, not just wealth. The room fell silent, and Clara's cheeks burned under the scrutiny. Then a farmer in the back clapped, followed by another. Not everyone joined, but it was enough to shift the air. Henry's jaw tightened, and Lillian, seated near him, shot Clara a venomous look. As the meeting adjourned with no decision, Elias found her outside, his breath visible in the chilly air. You were incredible, he said, his voice low and warm. I've never seen anyone stand up to Whitaker like that. Clara's heart lifted, but the victory felt fragile. Henry's influence ran deep, and Lillian's glare promised trouble. As rain began to fall pattering on the pines, Clara wondered if her words had planted a seed or merely stirred a storm. Rain fell in sheets over Willow Creek, turning the orchard's paths to mud and cloaking the town in a silver haze. Clara stood under the shelter of a gnarled apple tree, its branches heavy with fruit and water, her breath catching as she watched Elias wrestle a tarp over a stack of crates. The storm had come on, suddenly threatening the harvest they'd worked so hard to protect. Her dress clung to her skin, soaked through, but she didn't care. The orchard was her fight now as much as it was Elias's, and the council's indecision last night had only steeled her resolve. Henry Whitaker's shadow loomed larger than ever, but Clara felt a fire kindling inside her, a refusal to let this place, or her place in it, be washed away. "Clara, get under cover," Elias called, his voice cutting through the rain's roar. He jogged toward her, his hat dripping, and pulled her under the tarp he'd secured. Their shoulders brushed in the cramped space, and the scent of wet wool and apples enveloped them. "You're stubborn as a mule," he said, a grin tugging at his lips, despite the worry in his eyes. "Takes one to know one," Clara shot back, her heart lighter than it had been in days. They worked together to save what they could, tying down tarps and hauling crates to the barn. The labor was grueling, but it felt right, like they were anchoring each other against the storm. As they paused to catch their breath, Elias's gaze lingered on her, soft but searching. "You didn't have to stay out here," he said. "This isn't your fight." "It is now," Clara replied, meeting his eyes. "You gave me a chance when no one else did. I'm not walking away." The words carried more weight than she intended, and for a moment the rain seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet space between them. Their moment was broken by the clatter of hooves. Lillian Carver appeared, her cloak sodden, but her posture regal as she dismounted under a nearby tree. "Elias, this is madness," she called, her voice sharp. "Your orchard's drowning and you're wasting time with her. Come to town, let me help you." Her eyes flicked to Clara, dismissive and cold. "You can't save this place with a hired hand." Clara's fist clenched, but Elias spoke first, his tone calm but unyielding. "Clara's more than that, Lillian. She's part of this orchard now, and we're not giving up." His words sent a warmth through Clara stronger than the chill of the rain. Lillian's lips thinned, and she mounted her horse, riding off without another word. By dusk, the rain eased, leaving a world washed clean. Clara and Elias stood in the barn, surrounded by salvaged crates, their clothes muddy and their hands raw. "We saved most of it," Elias said, his voice heavy with relief. "Thanks to you." He reached out, brushing a streak of mud from her cheek, his touch gentle but electric. Clara's breath caught, and she saw something shift in his eyes, something that mirrored the hope stirring in her chest. But trouble wasn't far behind. Tilly arrived, her face grim. "Whitaker's called another council meeting tomorrow. Says the storm proves the orchard's a lost cause. He's got half the town believing him." She squeezed Clara's arm. "You shook them up last time, girl. You'll need to do it again." Clara's stomach knotted. Speaking once had been hard enough. Facing the town again with Henry's influence growing and Lillian's venom lurking felt like walking into a lion's den. But as she looked at Elias, his steady presence grounding her, she knew she couldn't back down. The orchard wasn't just land. It was a testament to resilience, to building something lasting against the odds. And maybe it was the foundation of something more between them. As the moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light over the drenched orchard, Clara felt a quiet strength take root. She'd come to Willow Creek seeking a new life, but she was finding something deeper, a purpose, a partnership, and a fight worth winning. Could she summon the courage to face the town again and protect the home she was beginning to love? The town hall smelled of damp wood and wax, its walls glowing under the flicker of oil lamps. As Clara stood at the back, her heart pounding like a drum. The second council meeting was packed, the air thick with tension and the murmur of voices. Outside, the Bitterroot River roared, swollen from the recent storm, its sound a faint echo of the battle Clara knew she faced tonight. Henry Whitaker stood at the front, his voice smooth as polished stone, weaving a tale of progress and prosperity. "Elias Kane's orchard is a relic," he declared, gesturing to the crowd. "This storm's proof it can't survive. Sell the land, and we'll build a lumber mill that'll put Willow Creek on the map." His eyes found Clara, a smirk curling his lips. "Let's not be swayed by sentiment or outsiders with no stake here." The jab hit hard, but Clara refused to flinch. She'd spent the day preparing with Elias and Tilly, gathering evidence of the orchard's value records, of its harvests, letters from families who relied on its fruit. Her hands shook as she clutched the papers, but Elias's nod from across the room steadied her. His hazel eyes held a quiet faith that made her feel seen, not as a cast-off or a farmhand, but as a partner. She drew a breath, the scent of rain-soaked earth still clinging to her from their morning in the orchard, and stepped forward. "May I speak?" Clara's voice cut through the murmurs, surprising even herself with its strength. Heads turned, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. Henry's smirk faltered, and Lillian, seated near him, crossed her arms, her emerald eyes narrowing. Clara ignored them, focusing on the faces before her farmers, shopkeepers, mothers. "I'm new here," she began, "and I know some of you see me as Whitaker's mistake. But I've worked Elias's orchard. I've seen its heart. It feeds this town, employs your neighbors, and holds your history. A lumber mill might bring money, but it'll strip this land bare. Is that what you want for Willow Creek?" She held up the harvest records, her voice gaining force. "Last year, this orchard fed over 50 families through winter. It's not a relic, it's a lifeline. And it's worth more than one man's profit." She looked at Henry, her gaze unflinching. "You call me an outsider, Mr. Whitaker, but I'm fighting for this town's future, same as anyone here." The room erupted in murmurs, some nodding, others whispering doubts. A farmer stood, his voice gruff. "She's got a point. My kids ate Kane's apples all winter." A woman near the back added, "That orchard's been here longer than Whitaker's fancy suits." Laughter rippled and Clara's chest loosened, hope flickering like the lamps. Henry's face reddened, but he rallied. "Sentiment won't pay taxes or build roads. Progress demands sacrifice." He gestured to Lillian, who stood with a practiced smile. "Miss Carver can attest to the benefits a mill would bring. Her father's already pledged funds." Lillian's voice was smooth as silk. "Elias, you know I care about you, but clinging to that orchard is foolish. Let it go for the town's sake." Her words dripped with concern, but her glance at Clara was pure venom, as if Clara's presence threatened her claim on Elias. Elias rose, his voice steady. "This orchard's my home, and it's Clara's too if she wants it. We're not fighting for sentiment, we're fighting for what lasts." His eyes met Clara's, and the room seemed to fade, leaving only the warmth of his gaze. It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but it was a promise of partnership, and it gave her strength. The council voted, and by a narrow margin, they rejected Henry's proposal. Cheers mixed with grumbles as the meeting ended, and Clara felt the weight of 100 eyes, some warm, some wary. Outside, under a sky clearing to stars, Elias found her. "You changed their minds," he said, his voice low and proud. "You're more than this town deserves." Clara's heart raced, but doubt lingered. Henry's defeat wasn't the end. She'd seen the fury in his eyes, and Lillian's glare promised trouble. As the river's song filled the night, Clara wondered if she'd won a battle only to face a larger war. The morning sun broke through the pines, casting golden rays across the orchard, where Clara knelt, her hands deep in the cool earth. She was planting new saplings, their fragile roots, a quiet promise of growth, much like the hope she'd begun to nurture in Willow Creek. The council's vote had saved the orchard, but the victory felt fleeting. Henry Whitaker's silence since the meeting was too heavy, like the calm before a storm, and Lillian's sharp glances around town carried a warning Clara couldn't ignore. Yet as she pressed soil around a sapling, the scent of damp earth and apple blossoms grounded her. She was building something here, not just for herself, but for a future she could almost see one, where she and Elias stood side by side. Elias worked nearby, his broad shoulders bent over a broken fence post. The past week had drawn them closer, their conversations weaving through shared laughter and quiet confessions. He'd told her about his dreams for the orchard, expanding it to include a cider press, sharing the harvest with neighboring towns. She'd shared her own past, the pain of her fiancé's betrayal in Boston, the years spent proving her worth through work. "You're not what they said you were," Elias had told her last night, his voice soft under the starlit sky. "You're stronger than any of them." His words had lingered, warming her even now, but the peace shattered when a horse's hooves thundered down the orchard path. Henry Whitaker dismounted, his face a mask of cold determination, flanked by two men in suits, land agents, Clara guessed. Kane Henry barked, ignoring Clara. "You've had your little victory, but I'm not done. This orchard's on borrowed time. I've got buyers ready to pay double what it's worth. Elias straightened his jaw tight. I told you, Whitaker. This land's not for sale. Not now, not ever. His voice was steady, but Clara saw the tension in his hands clenched around a hammer. Henry's eyes flicked to Clara, his smirk cruel. You're tying your fate to a nobody, Kane. She's got no place here, and neither does your failing orchard. His words cut deep, echoing the taunts she'd heard all her life. Too plain, too stubborn, too much. But this time Clara didn't flinch. She stood brushing dirt from her hands and stepped beside Elias. I'm not a nobody, she said, her voice clear and fierce. And this orchard isn't failing. It's thriving because we believe in it. You can't buy that kind of strength, Mr. Whitaker. The agents shifted uncomfortably, and Henry's smirk faded, replaced by a flash of fury. Before he could retort, Lillian appeared, her auburn hair catching the sunlight as she strode forward. Elias listened to reason, she said, her tone pleading, but laced with manipulation. You could have so much more life with someone who fits this town, not an outsider, who stirred nothing but trouble. Her eyes locked on Clara, sharp as a blade, but Clara held her gaze, refusing to shrink. Elias stepped closer to Clara, his presence a quiet anchor. Lillian, you've got no claim on me or my choices. Clara's not trouble. She's the best thing that's happened to this orchard and to me. His words hung in the air, raw and unguarded, and Clara's heart stuttered. It wasn't a confession of love, not quite, but it was a declaration of loyalty that sent warmth flooding through her. Henry scoffed, mounting his horse. You'll regret this, Kane. Both of you. He rode off with his agents, leaving a tense silence. Lillian lingered, her face pale, then turned and left without a word. Clara exhaled, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of Elias's words. As the sun climbed higher, Elias turned to her, his eyes soft but serious. I meant what I said, Clara. You're part of this place now, part of me if you'll have it. His hand found hers, calloused and warm, and for the first time Clara let herself believe in a future where she was enough. But Henry's threat echoed in her mind, and Lillian's defeat felt too quiet. As the orchard bloomed around them, Clara knew the fight wasn't over. Could she and Elias protect what they'd built, or would the storm break them before they could truly begin? The orchard glowed under the late autumn sun, its leaves a tapestry of crimson and gold as Clara stood at the edge of the field, her hands cradling a basket of apples. The air was crisp, carrying the sweet tang of ripened fruit and the distant murmur of the Bitterroot River. Weeks had passed since Henry Whitaker's last threat, and though his silence unnerved her, Clara felt a quiet strength settling in her bones. Willow Creek was no longer just a destination, it was home. The orchard, with its stubborn roots and resilient blooms, had become her sanctuary, and Elias Kane, with his steady heart, had become her anchor. But today a reckoning loomed, and Clara knew the peace they'd fought for hung by a thread. The town had buzzed with rumors. All week Henry had rallied new investors, claiming the orchard's land was key to a railroad deal that would transform Willow Creek. The council had called an emergency meeting, and whispers of coercion swirled. Clara had seen the fear in the townsfolk's eyes at the general store, their loyalty to Elias tested by promises of wealth. She'd spent the morning with Tilly rallying supporters, but doubt gnawed at her. Could they withstand Henry's final push, or would the orchard and her place in it crumble? Elias found her as she set the basket down, his hazel eyes bright with purpose. You ready for this? He asked, his voice steady, despite the tension in his shoulders. He wore his best vest, the one he'd worn at the festival, and Clara's heart skipped at the sight of him, rugged, honest hers, in a way she hadn't dared hope for. As ready as I'll ever be, she said, managing a smile. But Elias, if this goes wrong... She trailed off, the weight of losing the orchard, of losing him too heavy to voice. He took her hand, his grip warm and sure. It won't. We've got each other, Clara. That's enough. His words were a vow, and as they walked toward town, the scent of pine and earth wrapping around them, Clara felt the courage she'd carried from Boston flare anew. The town hall was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Henry stood at the front, flanked by men in city suits, their faces hard as they outlined the railroad's benefits. Jobs, growth, a future. Kane's orchard stands in the way, Henry said, his voice smooth but venomous. It's one man's dream against a town's prosperity. And his choice of company, his eyes flicked to Clara, shows his judgment can't be trusted. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Clara's chest tightened, but she felt Elias's hand brush hers, a silent reminder of their shared fight. Tilly stood, her voice booming. Whitaker's selling you a future that'll strip this town bare. Elias's orchard feeds us, binds us. And Clara's shown more heart than most of you in this room. A few clapped, but Henry's smirk didn't waver. Then Lillian rose, her voice soft but cutting. Elias, I begged you to let this go. You're throwing away everything for her. Her eyes glistened, but Clara saw the calculation beneath the tears. The crowd leaned in, swayed by her performance. Clara stood, her heart pounding but her voice clear. I came to Willow Creek unwanted judge for what I'm not. But I've seen what this orchard means, not just to Elias, but to all of you. It's not just land. It's your history, your home. Henry's railroad might bring money, but it'll take your soul. I'm asking you to choose what lasts. Her words hung in the air, raw and true, and she saw eyes soften, heads nod. Elias spoke next, his voice quiet but powerful. This orchard's my life, and Clara's made it better, made me better. I'm not giving it up, and I'm not giving her up. His gaze met hers and the room faded. It was a confession, a promise, and Clara's heart soared. The council voted, and by a single vote, the orchard was saved. Cheers erupted, drowning out Henry's furious exit. Lillian followed him, her face a mask of defeat. Outside, under a sky streaked with sunset, Elias pulled Clara close. Marry me, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Not because you need a home, but because I want you in mine, always. Clara laughed, tears in her eyes. Yes, she whispered, and as they kissed, the orchard behind them glowed, a testament to their shared strength. They'd not only saved the land, but transformed Willow Creek, planting seeds of acceptance and resilience that would grow for years. As the stars emerged, Clara knew they'd built more than a home, they'd built a legacy. If you love stories of resilience and love overcoming prejudice, like, share, and subscribe to our channel now to explore more.